You are listening to the Political Periscope, a weekly podcast brought to you by Radio WNET. Interviews on international politics, security, geopolitics, economy, and more. Every Thursday at 7 p.m.
Today's guest of the Political Periscope is Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović, former President of the Republic of Croatia.
Political Periscope.
In September 2015, in New York, along with President Andrzej Duda, you've started the Free Seas initiative. Looking from today, do you think it was a good idea? And how is it?
Today's guest of the Political Periscope is Dmitry Rupel, sociologist, politologist, diplomat, former Minister of the Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Slovenia.
Which is, as we have always underlined, the backbone of European resilience. So the initiative actually started out of the initial talks that I had with President Duda shortly after we had been elected. We met in Krakow for the first time, and we're exchanging opinion on the security and stability in our region. So we discussed energy dependence, we discussed lack of infrastructure, etc. And coincidentally, at the same time, the U.S. Atlantic Council was also working on the energy security strategy for Central and Eastern Europe. And we talked to them, and together we organized that first exploratory meeting in 2015 in New York on the margins of the UN General Assembly meeting, and then continued with the first summit in Dubrovnik, and then later on the initiative developed. The initial idea was to connect the Baltic and the Black Seas, but then we realized that we have to connect the entire area between the three seas, so including the Black Sea as well, that incorporates 12 EU member countries. And we defined 3 areas that were crucial importance for the goals that we wanted to achieve. And that was cohesion of the European space, that was competitiveness of our own economies, and that was also cooperation and connectivity, connecting the north and south of Central Europe, not just east and west connections that had been reestablished after the end of the Cold War. The initiative wasn't driven just by economic purposes, but by geostrategic considerations as well, because both President Duda and I and our colleagues realized that energy independence is crucial for political stability, not just for economies, but the stability of every nation. It removes the element of potential blackmail from countries who are the sole or just a few sources of energy that you have. And looking at the other 2 pillars, transportation and digitalization, they are also of immense importance in today's circumstances. So connecting our space with proper infrastructure, including leading into Ukraine, is essential for the security of our space, because this isn't just about the ease and the speed of travel. It's also about being able to move troops and equipment, etc., quickly around the area. And digitalization, of course, in building resilient societies, in being able to resist cyber attacks and other type of hybrid warfare, but also in combating elements that we share in common and that undermine our future prosperity and development, which is, for instance, demographic trends. So in order to provide for the kind of conditions for young people to be able to stay and live in our countries or to return from other countries, we need to create the kind of circumstances that exist in other parts of the world that are currently, or in other parts of Europe that are still more developed than we are.
Today, in the light of the war started by Russia in Ukraine, and energy blackmail of Putin towards Europe, the Free Seas Initiative seems to be very useful. However, there are still countries inside, like Hungary, or, for example, Austria, which are not so much involved in the initiative. What can be done, and what's the state of affairs?
Well, certainly countries like Austria have a little bit of less of an interest in the development of infrastructure, because Austria has a bit of different historical experience during the Cold War, and their infrastructure was a lot more developed than ours was in those times. However, both Austria and Hungary are very important for connectivity, to connect the region. So what I believe needs to be done is to push the initiative further from the current system of annual summits and everything being done basically by the office of the president of the country, who has undertaken the responsibility to organize the next summit, to create some kind of a permanent structure, whether it be secretariat or some kind of a working group that would provide for continuity from one presidency to another, and that would provide for specific advice and the follow-up work that would keep everybody informed, etc. What I've noticed in Croatia, and I think it's the case in many countries, is that our own line ministries still don't realize the potential that the initiative offers in terms of investment into infrastructure. So when line ministries, transportation, energy, digitalization, when they plan their projects, they often don't think of the initiative as being a source of funding. In addition to that, in addition of its application within the membership of the initiative itself, we want to attract more investment from the outside, from international financial institutions and others, so that the EU funding is combined and the money from the joint from a fund is combined with other sources of investment as well.
Critics say that despite creating the Free Seas Investment Fund, without American money, without the money from the US, Free Seas Initiative is pointless and has no chances to succeed.
I do not agree with that. I believe that the success depends entirely upon us. How we will take the initiative further. In the beginning, there was a lot of skepticism around the EU and around the world of what the intent of the initiative was. A lot of people thought that, or labeled us, that we were trying to break European unity. And on the contrary, this is actually an initiative that is aimed at a more unified Europe, at cohesion, at erasing the differences between the former East and the West of the European Union. There were also speculations about the initiative being an American Trojan horse in Europe, that it was American-dominated, instigated by the US, etc. Well, this is actually a very domestic in terms of our domestic publics, our own initiative that comes from within. It's an initiative that is native to the region. It was not imposed upon the region. So we were looking at ways how to resolve the crucial problems of infrastructure, which is the basis of our economic development and security. And therefore, yes, American funding would be extremely important. In my conversations with U.S. administrations, I always underlined the importance of investment. Investment cannot be driven just by economic considerations any longer. It must be driven by geopolitical considerations as well. The U.S. Always has objections about the level of Chinese investment in Europe, and in particular, our region, Central Europe, is mentioned in that context. Well, this is a viable initiative that provides opportunities for investment into infrastructure that would be investment that is done according to the rules, the set rules, and that is based on the values that we share. So I hope that the U.S. will get involved. Obviously, U.S. support is always a very important political factor in any initiative, but so is the support of the European Commission, which has also been actively engaged in basically most of or all of our summits, apart from the first initial exploratory meeting.
You've touched on the subject of accusations towards the Free Seas Initiative of breaking the European unity and solidarity. However, today we live in times where there are many conflicts within the European Union. For example, between European Commission and Italy, emerging conflict between the European Commission and Poland, Hungary. The funds from the recovery plans are withheld by European Commission. Funds for Poland, even from cohesion funds. Do you think that in case of possible, I'm not saying that it is possible, but some people say it's possible, that the European Union will fall apart? Do you think that the Free Seas Initiative could in some way replace it in some of its functions?
I don't think that the EU will fall apart, well, at least not anytime soon. I mean, looking at historical developments, there was no political or military structure that obviously existed forever. So there will be evolution of the EU, in which direction it remains to be seen. But right now, yes, we stand for European unity, solidarity, and cohesion. I don't see any initiative, including the Three Seas initiative, as replacing it. First of all, the initiative right now is aimed at three pillars of infrastructure. Obviously, political conversations are also dominated by geopolitical considerations and security issues, the implications of the war in Ukraine and potential escalation or how to prevent it, and how to end that conflict and provide for the sovereignty, security, and independence of Ukraine, or rather to assist Ukraine in their right to self-defense and to achieve those goals. So the Three Seas initiative, the value is that it complements the European Union and that it's aimed at the strengthening of the EU. And this is how it should be perceived. And when it comes to the role of Poland specifically, after the 24th of February, and the world will never be the same. There is no reset button to the pre-24th of February world. So after the 24th of February, I believe that Poland has really gained in strategic weight. But I won't say significance because it has always been extremely strategically significant. But in the weight that finally attention is being paid to what Poland and a number of other countries have been saying about a number of issues. Look at the Nord Stream 2 project. There were 16 of our countries who signed letters and letters to the European Commission to stop the project. Now, the situation has forced us to start working towards energy independence. But the Three Seas initiative has really created the framework for all of our countries within the initiative to proceed very quickly, because we already have a list of projects. We have, although there is no secretariat, but there are mechanisms for working together. There are mechanisms for cooperation. So we're not starting from ground zero. As a matter of fact, we've done a lot in the context of the initiative, in particular with energy sector. Croatia finally has that LNG terminal in Krk, and it remains our responsibility to connect the whole space with energy interconnectors and reverse flow connectors, etc., in order to be able to stabilize each other and to provide alternative sources of energy and assistance to those who are in need, including going all the way to Ukraine to help Ukraine with not just the kind of humanitarian and military assistance that individual countries are providing, but if need be with energy assistance as well.
In the area between those Free Seas, there are also other countries today. There are 12 countries in Free Seas Initiative, but there are other countries, like some of them not in the EU yet, like Ukraine, some of them already in the EU, like Finland, What do you think? Is it possible to enlarge the Three Seas initiative?
There have been these discussions now for a number of years for potential enlargement, and they go beyond, they encompass even some EU member countries. However, the logic was always first to keep it focused on the region. So we created the mechanisms of special partnerships with certain countries. And the logic of keeping it to EU member states was also the perception of security and stability. If you want to attract investment, one of the advantages that the EU membership brings with is that perception of stability, of transparency, of an environment that is safe for investment. However, with the geopolitical situation that has changed, of course, it's up to the member countries to take any decisions on potential future membership. But I certainly see the need for a greater partnership in whatever form with Ukraine, for instance. And we have seen the effects of war. We talk about weaponization of energy, but also of food, of foodstuffs, much of which come out of Ukraine. So in addition to Russian aggression and Russia destroying fields and crops and denying exit of ships from Ukrainian ports, you have additional problems with transportation because our railway systems are not compatible, and we're running into the or lack of transportation, ground transportation routes out of Ukraine to our countries, where we could have eased this problem of exporting foodstuffs to not just the EU, but also the countries in need in Africa and other parts of the world. So these are all very specific lessons learned from the ground that need to be applied in the future development of the Three Seas initiative as well.
In the past 2 months, Radio WNET traveled through all the countries of the Three Seas initiative. And from my observation among people, but also among politicians, the consciousness of the Three Seas initiative is quite low. And what can be done about it?
I believe I've actually covered this ground when I said that I've noticed in Croatia, and I believe it's the case in other countries, is that our administration, those who should be carrying out the projects, are not well aware of the potentials of the initiative. And I underline that I believe that this can be resolved by establishing this permanent structure, whether you call it secretariat or something else, that would provide for continuation, but also appropriate information and engagement of the governments, of the members of the Three Seas in really giving full potential to the initiative, but also fully using the opportunities that arise from the initiative.
In the Three Seas initiative, the leading role is, of course, of the central government. But are there any initiatives, any actions on lower level, like non-governmental level and local governments level?
Yes, there are initiatives on the level of not purely governmental organizations. For instance, there is cooperation between chambers of the economy, chambers of commerce, and there is some business cooperation, but that is another area where we have to spur cooperation between not just business people and business entities, but look at other ways how we can bring people closer together through our common historical and cultural heritage, through promotion of tourism, through promotion of education, exchanges, etc. So I believe that a lot more can be done. And I think that the level where we still have no cooperation whatsoever that you've mentioned is the level of regions, of not just countries cooperating together, but regions from different countries getting into a direct kind of cooperation with respect to implementation or future plans of how the initiative can be used for the benefit of multiple regions within a certain area.
I need to correct you, because actually there is such initiative on the regional level. In 2020, Lubelskie Voivodeship from Poland started the network of regions of the Three Seas. But actually the point of my question was to see how this local initiative is visible on the higher level, and I clearly see it's not.
Well, thank you for correcting me. It's really good to hear that there are initiatives from the local level. And as a matter of fact, yes, there are initiatives that come from Croatia as well, from the region of Istria, who have also, the leadership of Istria have also noted the potential of the 3 Cs initiative. However, as we say in Croatian, jedna lasta ne čini proljeće, one swallow doesn't, or in this case, a couple of swallows doesn't make the spring. You don't hear much about it. So this should be made a rule. And I think that one of the tasks of that potential future secretariat would be to bring regions closer together. And they don't have to be necessarily geographically connected and share the same borders. They can be regions maybe on the geographical margins of the initiative that can connect with each other, because they often share similar problems or similar issues that could complement the work of the initiative very much.
Last question. According to your experience and your expertise, when and how will the war in Ukraine end?
Well, the war in Ukraine could end right now if Russia pulled its forces out of Ukraine. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that's not going to happen, as we have seen that the positions of Ukraine and Russia are right now very much, there's a huge gap there. There is almost an insurmountable difference in their positions. And short of an outright military victory, of course, the wars, the conflicts are resolved by diplomatic means, by negotiations. However, I don't see at this moment potential for diplomatic solution. I do see potential for shuttle diplomacy, for putting influence to stop the targeting of civilians, the shelling of infrastructure, etc. Right now, Ukraine definitely has the momentum, but that does not mean that we're nearing the end of the war. Unfortunately, I think that the hostilities will continue into some foreseeable future. But the end solution must be a sovereign, independent Ukraine, which is crucial for the security and stability of all of us.
Thank you very much. Hvala.
Hvala vama.
This was The Political Periscope. The podcast is released every Thursday at 7 p.m.